Hello, and welcome to Tales of History. If you're settling in for the night, finding a comfortable position, and looking for a story to help you drift off to sleep, you're in the right place. Tonight, we're exploring one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of archaeology. A story about an ancient computer, lost beneath the waves for 2,000 years. A device so sophisticated that when it was finally understood, it rewrote everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. There's no need to follow every detail. Just let the story wash over you. Let your mind wander through the centuries as we explore the mystery of the Antikythera Mechanism. Get comfortable. Adjust your pillow. Close your eyes if you'd like. And let's begin our journey into the past. Imagine diving beneath the surface of the Mediterranean Sea. The year is 1900. You're a sponge diver, holding your breath, searching the seafloor for the valuable sea sponges that will feed your family. The water is clear but cold. Sunlight filters down from above, creating dancing patterns on the rocky bottom, and then you see it. The ghostly outline of a shipwreck, ancient beyond measure, its wooden hull long since rotted away. But scattered across the seafloor are bronze statues, their green patina glowing in the dim light. Marble sculptures, their white stone contrasting against the dark rocks. Amphorae, the clay storage jars of the ancient world, still intact after millennia beneath the waves. You surface, gasping for air, and tell your captain what you've found. Neither of you can know it yet, but you've just discovered one of the most important shipwrecks in history. And, hidden among the statues and pottery, corroded beyond recognition, lies an object that will baffle scientists for more than a century. This is the story of the Antikythera Mechanism, the ancient computer that shouldn't exist. Our story begins on Easter Sunday, 1900, in the waters between the Greek mainland and the island of Crete. A small boat carrying sponge divers was seeking shelter from a storm when they anchored near a tiny, rocky island called Antikythera. Sponge diving was dangerous work in those days. Divers would put on heavy canvas suits and copper helmets connected to the surface by an air hose. They would descend to depths of 60 meters or more, staying down as long as they could manage, searching for the valuable natural sponges that grew on the seafloor. One of the divers that day was named Elias Stadiatis. He descended to a depth of about 45 meters, roughly 150 feet below the surface. What he found there would change his life and, eventually, change our understanding of ancient technology. At first, Stadiatis thought he was seeing bodies, decomposed corpses scattered across the seafloor. He surfaced quickly, disturbed by what he'd seen, and told the captain, Dimitrios Kondos, about the underwater graveyard. Kondos decided to investigate himself. He descended to the same spot and quickly realized what Stadiatis had actually seen. Not bodies, but statues, bronze and marble sculptures from the ancient world. What Stadiatis had mistaken for rotting flesh was actually the patina and corrosion on bronze statues, and the pale marble of sculpted figures. This was a significant find. Ancient sculptures were valuable, and more importantly, the Greek government paid rewards for such archaeological discoveries. Kondos and his crew spent the next few days exploring the wreck site, recovering what they could, and noting the location. When they returned to their home port, they reported the discovery to the authorities. The Greek government was immediately interested. At that time, Greece was working to establish its national identity and reclaim its ancient heritage. Archaeological discoveries were matters of national pride. The government organized an expedition to excavate the wreck site. This would be one of the first major underwater archaeological excavations in history. The technology was primitive by modern standards. The divers used the same heavy canvas suits and copper helmets they used for sponge diving. They could stay down for only short periods. The risk of decompression sickness, known then as the bends, was ever present. Despite these challenges, over the course of several months in 1900 and 1901, the divers recovered an extraordinary haul of artifacts. There were bronze statues of horses and men, marble sculptures of exceptional quality, glass vessels, coins, jewelry, and pottery of various types. Everything was brought to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. There, archaeologists began the painstaking work of cataloging and conserving the finds. The statues drew most of the attention. Among them was a magnificent bronze sculpture that would later be known as the Antikythera Youth, one of the finest bronze statues to survive from ancient Greece. But as the conservators worked, they noticed something odd. Among the corroded bronze pieces was a lump that seemed different from the others. It was roughly the size of a shoebox, heavily encrusted with limestone and coral growth from its 2,000 years underwater. As it dried out in the museum, this lump began to crack and break apart. Inside, the conservators could see something unexpected. Not solid bronze, as they'd assumed, but a complex arrangement of bronze gears, wheels, and plates covered with inscriptions. At first, no one knew what to make of it. The object was broken into several pieces, and the corrosion made it difficult to see details. But clearly, this was some kind of mechanism, a machine of bronze gears. This was puzzling. The ancient Greeks were not known for creating complex gear mechanisms. While they had achieved remarkable things in art, architecture, and philosophy, their technology was generally considered relatively simple. Certainly nothing like the complex clockwork mechanism that seemed to be emerging from this corroded lump. The first scholar to seriously study the mechanism was Valerios Stais, an archaeologist at the National Museum. In 1902, Stais examined the fragments and made a startling suggestion. He proposed that this was some kind of astronomical calculator, a device for computing the positions of celestial bodies. This idea was met with considerable skepticism. Other scholars suggested it might be a navigational instrument, or perhaps an astrolabe, a known device for astronomical observation. Some thought it couldn't possibly be as old as the shipwreck itself, that it must be a later intrusion, perhaps from a medieval ship that sank on the same spot. The problem was that the mechanism was simply too complex for its time. The shipwreck was dated to approximately 70 to 60 BCE, based on the style of the pottery and other artifacts. But nothing like this device was known to exist from that period. It would be like finding a jet engine in a medieval castle. The technology seemed impossibly advanced for its era. And so, the Antikythera Mechanism sat in the museum, an anomaly that didn't fit into anyone's understanding of ancient technology. A few scholars published papers about it, but for decades it remained largely forgotten, overshadowed by the beautiful statues and other artifacts from the wreck. Let's pause here and consider what the ancient Greeks knew about astronomy and mathematics, because understanding their knowledge is crucial to understanding the Antikythera Mechanism. The ancient Greeks were sophisticated astronomers. By the time this device was built, probably in the late 2nd or early 1st century BCE, Greek astronomers had already made remarkable discoveries. They knew the Earth was round. This wasn't even controversial among educated Greeks. Eratosthenes had calculated the Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy in the 3rd century BCE. He had measured the angle of the Sun at 2 different locations and used geometry to estimate the size of the planet. His calculation was within a few percent of the true value. Greek astronomers had also developed complex models to predict the motions of the planets. They understood that the planets didn't move at constant speeds across the sky. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn would sometimes slow down, stop, and even move backward in what's called retrograde motion before resuming their forward movement. To explain this, Greek astronomers like Hipparchus and later Ptolemy developed a system of epicycles. They proposed that planets moved in small circles, called epicycles, while the center of these epicycles moved in larger circles around the Earth. By adjusting the sizes and speeds of these circles, they could predict planetary positions with considerable accuracy. The Greeks also understood the cycles of the moon. They knew that the moon's orbit was not perfectly regular. Sometimes the moon moved faster, sometimes slower. Sometimes it appeared higher in the sky, sometimes lower. All of these variations followed predictable patterns, and Greek astronomers had worked out these patterns in detail. They had also discovered the Metonic cycle, named after the astronomer Meton of Athens. This was the realization that 19 solar years equal almost exactly 235 lunar months. This meant that the phases of the moon would repeat on the same dates every 19 years. This discovery was crucial for creating accurate calendars that combined the solar year with lunar months. Perhaps most impressively, Greek astronomers could predict eclipses. They had discovered the Saros cycle, a period of approximately 18 years after which the pattern of solar and lunar eclipses repeats. Using this cycle, they could predict when and where eclipses would occur, sometimes centuries in advance. All of this knowledge was mathematical and astronomical. It was written in texts and discussed by scholars. But it was all theoretical. The ancient Greeks, as far as anyone knew, never built machines to calculate these cycles automatically, until the Antikythera mechanism was found. In the 1950s, interest in the Antikythera mechanism was revived by British science historian named Derek de Solla Price. Price was fascinated by the history of scientific instruments, and when he learned about the corroded gear mechanism sitting in Athens, he was determined to understand it. Price traveled to Athens and examined the fragments of the mechanism in detail. By this time, the mechanism had broken into more than 80 separate pieces. Some pieces were large, with visible gears. Others were small fragments with just a few teeth or part of an inscription. Price photographed the fragments from every angle. He made detailed drawings. He measured the gears, counting their teeth and noting their sizes. This was painstaking work. The corrosion obscured many details, and the fragments had to be handled with great care to avoid further damage. What Price discovered amazed him. This was not a simple device. It was an intricate mechanism with dozens of bronze gears, all interconnected in a complex system. Some gears were large, some small. Some were ordinary circular gears, but others were more unusual. There were differential gears, a sophisticated type that allows 2 inputs to combine into 1 output. These weren't even used in Europe until the 16th century CE, more than 1,600 years after the Antikythera mechanism was built. Price also studied the inscriptions on the fragments. The mechanism was covered with Greek text, both on the outside surfaces and on the interior parts. Much of this text was fragmentary and difficult to read due to corrosion, but Price could make out enough to understand that These were instructions for using the device and descriptions of what it displayed. After years of study, Price published his findings in 1974 in a landmark paper titled Gears from the Greeks. His conclusion was revolutionary. The Antikythera Mechanism was an astronomical calculator of extraordinary sophistication. It was designed to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. It could show the phases of the moon and predict eclipses. It was, in effect, a mechanical model of the cosmos, a computer made of bronze gears. Price's work finally brought the Antikythera Mechanism to the attention of the wider scientific community. Here was proof that ancient Greek technology was far more advanced than anyone had imagined. The Greeks hadn't just understood astronomical cycles mathematically. They had built a machine to calculate them automatically. But even Price couldn't fully understand the mechanism. The corrosion was too severe, and many details remained hidden. He had worked out the basic structure and function, but the complete picture was still missing. The breakthrough came with technology. In the 1970s, radiography became more advanced. Researchers used X-rays to peer inside the corroded lumps, revealing gear structures that were invisible to the naked eye. Later, in 2005, a team of researchers used a more advanced technology called computed tomography, or CT scanning. This is the same technology used in medical imaging. A CT scanner takes many X-ray images from different angles and then uses a computer to combine them into detailed three-dimensional images. The CT scans of the Antikythera Mechanism were revolutionary. For the first time, researchers could see every gear, every inscription, every detail of the mechanism, even parts that were completely hidden inside corroded bronze. It was like having X-ray vision into the ancient machine. What the CT scans revealed was astounding. The mechanism was even more complex than Price had realized. There were at least 30 bronze gears, possibly more in the missing sections. The gears were cut with precision, their teeth evenly spaced. The whole mechanism was originally housed in a wooden case, now long decayed, with bronze dials on the front and back. The scans also revealed more of the inscriptions. Thousands of Greek letters, providing an instruction manual for the device. As researchers painstakingly read and translated these texts, the purpose and operation of the mechanism became clear. Let me describe what the Antikythera Mechanism looked like when it was new, before it spent 2 millennia at the bottom of the sea. Imagine a wooden box, roughly the size and shape of a large book or a laptop computer. The box is about 30 centimeters tall, 15 centimeters wide, and perhaps 10 centimeters deep. On the outside of the box are bronze plates with inscriptions. On the front of the mechanism is a large circular dial. This dial represents the zodiac, the band of constellations through which the sun, moon, and planets appear to move. Around the edge of the dial are the names and symbols of the zodiac signs: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on. There's also a scale showing the months of the Egyptian calendar, which the Greeks used for astronomical purposes. The Egyptian calendar had 12 months of exactly 30 days each, plus 5 extra days, for a total of 365 days per year. On this front dial are several pointers. One pointer shows the position of the sun in the zodiac. As you turn a crank on the side of the mechanism, this pointer moves around the dial, showing which constellation the sun is in on any given date. Another pointer shows the position of the moon. This pointer moves faster than the sun pointer, making a complete circuit in about 29.5 days, the length of a lunar month. There are also pointers for the 5 planets known to the ancient Greeks: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These pointers move at different speeds, corresponding to the orbital periods of the planets as seen from Earth. But the mechanism doesn't just show positions. It shows the variations in speed that Greek astronomers had discovered. The moon pointer doesn't move at a constant rate. Sometimes it moves faster, sometimes slower, just as the real moon does in the sky. This variation is built into the gears of the mechanism, creating an accurate model of the moon's irregular motion. On the back of the mechanism are 2 large spiral dials. These are more complex than the circular dial on the front. The upper spiral dial shows the metonic cycle, the 19-year period we mentioned earlier. The spiral has 19 turns, 1 for each year in the cycle. As you turn the mechanism's crank, a pointer moves along the spiral, showing where you are in the 19-year cycle and displaying information about the lunar calendar. The lower spiral dial shows the Saros cycle, the eclipse prediction cycle. This spiral has 223 divisions, representing the 223 lunar months in one Saros period, about 18 years. Using this dial, you could predict when solar and lunar eclipses would occur, how long they would last, and what time of day they would happen. Inside the wooden case is the mechanism itself, a complex arrangement of bronze gears. These gears are connected in an intricate system that implements the mathematical relationships that Greek astronomers had discovered. There's a large gear that represents the year. It's connected to smaller gears that represent the lunar month. There are gears that implement the metonic cycle, ensuring that the lunar and solar calendars stay synchronized over the 19-year period. Most remarkably, there's a gear train that implements what's called the lunar anomaly. This is the variation in the moon's speed that Greek astronomers had measured. To create this variation mechanically, the mechanism uses a special gear arrangement including a pin and slot mechanism that creates variable motion from uniform rotation. There's also evidence of a differential gear, a sophisticated mechanical device that combines 2 inputs into 1 output. This is the same type of mechanism used in the differential of a car, allowing the wheels to turn at different speeds when going around a corner. All of this is driven by a single crank on the side of the box. Turn the crank forward, and time moves forward. The pointers move, showing the changing positions of the sun, moon, and planets. The spiral dials advance, tracking the long-term cycles. Turn the crank backward, and you can travel back in time, seeing where the celestial bodies were on any date in the past. The mechanism was a machine for exploring time and the heavens. It was a computer, made not of silicon and electricity, but of bronze gears and human ingenuity. Now, let's talk about the inscriptions, because they tell us how the mechanism was used and what it displayed. The mechanism was covered in text. On the front, back, and inside, Greek letters were carefully inscribed into the bronze. Much of this text has been lost to corrosion, but the CT scans revealed more than 3,000 letters that were previously unknown. The inscriptions serve several purposes. Some are labels, identifying what each dial and pointer displays. Others are instructions for using the device. Still others are like a user's manual, explaining what information the mechanism provides. On the front dial, inscriptions identify the zodiac signs and the months. There are also inscriptions describing the positions and characteristics of the planets. On the back, the inscriptions describe the spiral dials. For the metonic cycle dial, the inscriptions name each month in the lunar calendar and provide information about the festivals and games that occurred in different months. This last detail is particularly interesting. The mechanism doesn't just show abstract astronomical information. It connects the celestial cycles to human activities. It tells you when important religious festivals would occur, when the Olympic Games would be held, when other major events in the Greek calendar would take place. The Saros dial inscriptions describe the eclipses. For each position on the spiral, there's a description telling you what kind of eclipse to expect, at what time of day it will occur, and how long it will last. Some of these descriptions are quite detailed, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of eclipse prediction. The inscriptions also include what appears to be an instruction manual. These texts, found on the inside of the mechanism's case, explain how to use the device. They describe what each part does and how to interpret the displays. Reading these inscriptions, researchers realized that the mechanism was more than just a calculator. It was an educational tool, a way to demonstrate and explore the complex movements of the heavens. It was built not just to predict astronomical events, but to understand them. The inscriptions also provide clues about who made the mechanism and where. The Greek dialect used in the inscriptions suggests the device was made in the Greek islands, possibly Rhodes or Corinth, though this remains debated. The style of the text and the astronomical parameters it uses suggest it was built sometime between 150 and 100 BCE, though it could be slightly earlier or later. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Antikythera mechanism is what it tells us about ancient Greek technology and the skills that must have been required to build it. Creating this mechanism would have required expertise in several areas. First, obviously, there's the astronomical knowledge. The maker needed to understand the cycles of the sun, moon, and planets in precise mathematical detail. They needed to know gear ratios that would accurately reproduce these cycles. For example, the moon orbits the Earth approximately 12.37 times in 1 year. To create a gear train that produces this ratio, the maker needed gears with specific numbers of teeth. The mechanism uses several gears in sequence to build up this ratio, using gear sizes that were practical to manufacture. The lunar anomaly, the variation in the moon's speed, is even more complex. The moon's speed varies over a period of about 27.5 days. To reproduce this mechanically requires not just circular gears, but a special mechanism that can create variable speed from constant input. The Antikythera mechanism achieves this through an ingenious system involving a pin and slot device that converts circular motion into slightly elliptical motion. Then there's the physical craftsmanship required. The gears had to be cut from bronze with precision. The teeth needed to be evenly spaced and properly shaped so the gears would mesh smoothly. Each gear had to be mounted on an axle that could rotate freely without excessive friction. Bronze is not an easy material to work with precision. It's softer than steel, which makes cutting easier, but it also means the gears could wear down over time. The maker had to balance these considerations, creating gears that were both accurate and durable. The inscriptions had to be carefully engraved into the bronze. The letters are small and the text is dense. This required steady hands and good eyesight, as well as knowledge of the Greek language and the astronomical concepts being described. All of this had to fit into a relatively compact case. The mechanism is complex, but it's not large. Every part had to be carefully positioned to fit together, while still allowing all the gears to rotate freely. What's more, this wasn't a one-off creation. The sophistication of the Antikythera mechanism suggests it was part of a tradition. You don't create something this complex as your first attempt. There must have been earlier, simpler versions. there must have been other mechanisms, perhaps more advanced ones. This raises a tantalizing question. If the Greeks could build the Antikythera mechanism in the 2nd or 1st century BCE, what other machines did they build? What other technologies did they possess that we don't know about because the evidence hasn't survived? Who built the Antikythera mechanism, and why? These questions have fascinated researchers since the device was first understood. We don't know the name of the maker. Unlike many ancient artifacts, the Antikythera mechanism bears no signature, no mark of its creator, but we can make educated guesses about who might have built it and what their motivations were. Several ancient Greek scientists and engineers are known to have worked with mechanical devices and astronomical instruments. The most famous is Archimedes, the great mathematician and engineer of Syracuse, who lived in the 3rd century BCE. Ancient writers mention that Archimedes built a sphere, a mechanical model of the heavens that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. Cicero, the Roman philosopher and statesman, described seeing this device in the 1st century BCE. He wrote that Archimedes had constructed a globe that, when turned, reproduced the motions of the sun, moon, and planets, including the irregular motions and the eclipses. This sounds very much like the Antikythera mechanism. However, Archimedes died in 212 BCE, and the Antikythera mechanism was probably built later, around 150 to 100 BCE. So Archimedes himself didn't build this particular device, but he might have built an earlier version, and the Antikythera mechanism might be part of a tradition that he started. Another candidate is Hipparchus, one of the greatest astronomers of antiquity. Hipparchus lived in the 2nd century BCE and made many important astronomical discoveries. He measured the length of the year with great accuracy. He discovered the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis. He created detailed models of the motions of the sun and moon. Many of the astronomical parameters used in the Antikythera mechanism match Hipparchus's measurements. The gear ratios correspond to his calculations of the lunar month and the solar year. This suggests that either Hipparchus built the mechanism, or it was built by someone who used his astronomical data. Hipparchus is known to have worked on Rhodes, one of the proposed locations for the mechanism's creation. The inscriptions on the mechanism mention Rhodian month names, further supporting a connection to Rhodes. Another possible connection is to Posidonius, a philosopher and scientist who also worked on Rhodes in the 1st century BCE. Ancient writers mention that Posidonius had a sphere or globe that demonstrated the motions of the planets. Could this have been an Antikythera-type mechanism? But why would someone build such a device? What was its purpose? One possibility is that it was a demonstration tool, used for teaching astronomy. A professor or philosopher could use it to show students how the motions of the heavens work, how eclipses occur, how the calendar cycles relate to celestial movements. It would be a powerful teaching aid, making abstract concepts concrete and visible. Another possibility is that it was a display of wealth and knowledge. In ancient Greece and Rome, wealthy patrons often commissioned elaborate works of art and technology to demonstrate their sophistication and resources. Owning a device like the Antikythera mechanism would have been a mark of status, showing that you had both the money to commission such a work and the education to appreciate it. It might also have had practical purposes. While the Greeks had other methods for calculating astronomical events, the mechanism would have made these calculations much faster and easier. It could be useful for anyone who needed to plan events around the lunar calendar, predict eclipses, or determine the positions of planets for astrological purposes. And yes, astrology was a serious practice in the ancient world. Many people, including educated elites, believed that the positions of planets influenced human affairs. A device that could quickly determine planetary positions would have been valuable for casting horoscopes. The shipwreck that preserved the Antikythera Mechanism also raises interesting questions. Where was the ship going, and why was the mechanism on board? The ship was carrying a cargo of luxury goods. Besides the mechanism, there were bronze and marble statues, fine pottery, glassware, and other valuable items. This was clearly a ship transporting high-quality goods from the Greek world, probably to Rome. The date of the shipwreck, around 70 to 60 BCE, is significant. This was a time when Rome was expanding its power over the Greek world. Wealthy Romans were fascinated by Greek culture and eagerly collected Greek art and philosophy. There was a lucrative trade in Greek antiquities and luxury goods flowing to Rome. Was the Antikythera Mechanism being transported to a wealthy Roman patron? Was it looted from a Greek city, or was it commissioned and being delivered? We don't know, but it's intriguing to imagine the circumstances of its final voyage. The ship probably departed from somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean, perhaps Rhodes, Pergamon, or another Greek city, and was heading west toward Italy when it encountered a storm near Antikythera and sank. One of the most remarkable things about the Antikythera Mechanism is how much it has changed our understanding of ancient technology. Before the mechanism was fully understood, historians generally believed that complex geared mechanisms were a medieval invention, developed in Europe around the 14th century CE with the creation of mechanical clocks. The technology of precision gears and intricate mechanical calculations was thought to be a product of the late Middle Ages and Renaissance. The Antikythera Mechanism shows that this technology existed more than 1,300 years earlier. The ancient Greeks had already mastered the art of precision gear cutting and complex mechanical design. This raises an important historical question. If the Greeks had this technology in the 1st century BCE, why did it apparently disappear? Why didn't it continue to develop and spread? Part of the answer may be that it didn't disappear entirely. There are hints in ancient texts that such devices existed, though they were probably rare and expensive. The Roman writer Cicero mentions them. Other ancient authors refer to spheres and globes that demonstrated celestial motions. But the knowledge of how to build these devices may have been held by a small number of skilled craftsmen. When these craftsmen died without passing on their skills, or when the political and economic disruptions of late antiquity destroyed the conditions that supported such craftsmanship, the technology could have been lost. It's also possible that more such mechanisms existed but haven't survived. Bronze was valuable and was often melted down and reused in later periods. A complex mechanism, especially one that was broken or no longer understood, might simply be thrown in a furnace to recover the metal. Only the accident of the Antikythera shipwreck preserved this one example. If that ship hadn't sunk, if the mechanism had reached its destination in Rome, it might have eventually been destroyed or lost, and we would never have known it existed. This makes us wonder what else we don't know about ancient technology. How many other sophisticated devices existed but left no trace? How much ancient knowledge has been lost? Since the intensive study of the Antikythera Mechanism began in the early 2000s, researchers have made steady progress in understanding its details. In 2006, a major study published in the journal Nature presented the results of the CT scanning and revealed many previously unknown gears and inscriptions. This study confirmed that the mechanism could predict eclipses and showed how the various dials and pointers worked together. In 2008, researchers announced that they had deciphered more of the inscriptions and found evidence that the mechanism might have displayed all 7 classical planets, not just the 5 visible to the naked eye. Though the gears for these additional planet displays are missing, the inscriptions suggest they might have existed. In subsequent years, researchers have built working reconstructions of the mechanism. Using the CT scan data and their understanding of how the gears connect, they've created modern reproductions using both traditional bronze and modern materials. These reproductions demonstrate that the mechanism works exactly as theorized, accurately reproducing the celestial motions and cycles. These reconstructions have also revealed subtle details about how the ancient maker solved various mechanical problems. For instance, the mechanism uses a technique called backlash reduction, where gears are designed with slight play between the teeth to accommodate small imperfections and prevent jamming. This is a sophisticated engineering technique that shows deep understanding of mechanical principles. Researchers have also explored how accurate the mechanism was. Could it really predict astronomical events correctly, or was it more of a symbolic representation? The answer is that it was remarkably accurate for its time. The mechanism correctly models the irregular motion of the moon, including its variation in speed. It accurately implements the 19-year Metonic cycle and the 18-year Saros cycle. Its predictions of eclipse timing and duration match what modern astronomical calculations show would have been visible from the eastern Mediterranean in the 1st century BCE. Of course, there are limits to its accuracy. The ancient Greeks didn't know about some factors that affect celestial motions, such as the gravitational influence of the planets on each other. They also used slightly incorrect values for some orbital periods, because their measurements, while impressive, weren't perfect. But within the limits of ancient astronomical knowledge, the mechanism was as accurate as it could possibly be. It correctly implemented what the Greeks knew and could measure. Modern researchers continue to study the mechanism and make new discoveries. Not all of the fragments have been fully analyzed. Not all of the inscriptions have been completely read. And the front of the mechanism, which would have shown the planetary displays, is mostly missing, so we're still not certain exactly how it represented the planets. But with each new analysis, with each new application of modern technology to this ancient artifact, we learn more. And each discovery makes the achievement of its ancient maker seem even more remarkable. Let's take a moment to imagine what it would have been like to use the Antikythera mechanism in ancient times. You're a Greek astronomer or philosopher in the 1st century BCE. Perhaps you're in Rhodes or Athens or another center of learning. You have in your possession this remarkable bronze machine, housed in its wooden case, decorated with inscriptions. You want to know when the next eclipse will occur. You open the case and turn the crank on the side. The gears begin to move with a soft, clicking sound, bronze teeth engaging with bronze teeth. The pointers on the front dial rotate, showing the sun and moon moving through the zodiac. You continue turning the crank, advancing through the days and months. You watch the back dials, where the spiral pointer slowly advances along its path, marking the passage of lunar months. Finally, you reach a position marked on the Saros dial, indicating an eclipse. The inscription at that position tells you it will be a solar eclipse, visible in the afternoon, lasting approximately 3 minutes. You note the date shown on the calendar dial. You make your prediction. and when the date arrives, the sun is indeed darkened, just as the mechanism foretold. Or perhaps you're using the mechanism to plan a festival. The ancient Greek calendar was lunar, based on the phases of the moon, but it needed to stay synchronized with the solar year for agricultural reasons. This was complex, requiring the addition of extra months in certain years. The mechanism solves this problem. Its metonic dial shows you exactly which years need the extra month to keep the calendar aligned with the seasons. You can plan years in advance, knowing when the Olympic Games will occur, when the religious festivals will fall, when to plant crops based on the calendar. Or maybe you're simply exploring. You turn the crank backward, traveling back in time, watching how the heavens appeared in years past. You note where the planets were on the day you were born, or on some historically significant date. You marvel at the dance of the celestial bodies, the complex patterns they trace across the sky, all reproduced in miniature by this machine of gears. The mechanism is more than just a tool. It's a window into the cosmos, a way to see the order and beauty of the heavens made tangible and comprehensible. The Antikythera Mechanism has inspired numerous attempts to build working replicas. These projects have taught us a great deal about ancient technology and the challenges of recreating such a complex device. Several teams have built reconstructions using modern materials and tools. These replicas demonstrate that the mechanism's design works exactly as the ancient fragments suggest. The gears mesh properly, the displays show the correct astronomical information, and the device operates smoothly when the crank is turned. Other builders have taken on a more difficult challenge, recreating the mechanism using only tools and techniques that would have been available to ancient craftsmen. This means cutting gears by hand, using files and saws rather than computer-controlled machines. It means shaping bronze without the benefit of modern metallurgy. It means working from incomplete information, filling in the gaps with educated guesses. These period-accurate reconstructions have revealed just how skilled ancient craftsmen were. Cutting precise gears by hand is extraordinarily difficult. Each tooth must be the same size and shape, evenly spaced around the gear. Even small errors can cause the gears to bind or slip. Yet the ancient maker of the Antikythera Mechanism achieved this level of precision more than 2,000 years ago. Some modern reconstructions have explored variations on the mechanism's design. If you have 30 gears available, there are many different ways to connect them to achieve similar results. Modern engineers have discovered that the ancient maker chose remarkably efficient solutions, often using fewer gears than modern designers would have thought necessary. These reconstruction projects have also revealed something about the process of ancient innovation. The makers of devices like the Antikythera Mechanism weren't just following instructions. They were solving problems, experimenting with different approaches, developing new techniques. They were, in every sense, engineers and inventors. The Antikythera Mechanism was discovered in a context that tells its own fascinating story. The shipwreck that preserved it for 2 millennia was a Roman cargo vessel, probably traveling from the Greek East to Italy. The ship was large for its time, perhaps 40 meters long. It was heavily loaded with cargo, which may have contributed to its sinking. The weight of all those bronze and marble statues, plus pottery and other goods, would have made the ship sit low in the water and handle poorly in storms. The location of the wreck, near the small island of Antikythera, suggests the ship was following the common shipping route from the eastern Mediterranean to Rome. Ships would sail north along the coast of Greece, then cut across to southern Italy, avoiding the open waters of the central Mediterranean when possible. But the waters around Antikythera are treacherous. Strong currents flow through the strait between the island and Crete. Sudden storms can arise with little warning. Many ships met their end in these waters over the centuries. When the ship sank, probably in a storm, it came to rest at a depth of about 45 meters. The wooden hull gradually decayed, eaten by marine organisms and broken down by currents. But the heavy cargo items, the statues and pottery and bronze mechanisms, remained where they fell, slowly becoming encrusted with limestone deposits and coral growth. The water temperature at that depth is cold enough to slow biological decay, but not so cold as to prevent all life. The mechanism's bronze gears became covered in concretions, a kind of limestone crust formed by minerals precipitating from the seawater. This actually helped preserve the mechanism by protecting it from further corrosion. For more than 2,000 years, the mechanism lay there in the darkness. Fish swam past it. Currents slowly covered it with sediment. The world above changed dramatically. The Roman Empire rose and fell. Christianity spread across Europe. The Renaissance rediscovered ancient learning. The Industrial Revolution transformed technology. And all the while, the mechanism waited in its underwater tomb, its secrets preserved by the sea. The discovery of the Antikythera mechanism has profound implications for how we understand ancient science and technology. First, it demonstrates that the ancient Greeks had a much more sophisticated understanding of astronomy than we previously realized. The mechanism doesn't just show that they knew the cycles of the heavens. It shows they understood these cycles so well that they could model them mechanically, accounting for irregular motions and long-term variations. Second, it proves that ancient craftsmen had advanced metalworking skills. They could work bronze to precise tolerances, creating gears that mesh smoothly and operate reliably. This level of craftsmanship suggests a tradition of fine mechanical work that may have produced other devices we don't know about. Third, it shows that there was a tradition of scientific instrument making in the ancient world. The mechanism isn't a simple device. It represents accumulated knowledge and refined techniques passed down through generations of craftsmen. This implies that there were workshops, perhaps in places like Rhodes or Alexandria, where such instruments were designed and built. Fourth, it makes us reconsider the historical narrative of technological progress. We tend to think of technology as steadily advancing over time, with each era more advanced than the last. But the Antikythera mechanism shows that technological capability can be lost as well as gained. The ancient Greeks achieved a level of mechanical sophistication that wouldn't be matched again for more than 1,000 years. This raises uncomfortable questions about other lost knowledge. What else did the ancient world achieve that we don't know about? How much was lost in the chaos of late antiquity, when libraries burned and craft traditions died out? The ancient library of Alexandria, for instance, housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing Greek and Egyptian learning. When it was destroyed, much of this knowledge vanished forever. We know the titles of many lost works and tantalizing fragments of others, but the full content is gone. Could there have been texts in that library describing how to build mechanisms like the Antikythera device? Were there other such mechanisms that were destroyed or lost? We'll probably never know, but the Antikythera mechanism makes us wonder. One of the fascinating aspects of the Antikythera mechanism is how it connects to the broader history of astronomical instruments and mechanical computation. After the ancient period, we know very little about complex mechanical devices until the Islamic Golden Age, roughly the 8th to 14th centuries CE. Islamic scientists and engineers created sophisticated astronomical instruments, including astrolabes and mechanical calendars. Some of these devices may have incorporated geared mechanisms, though nothing as complex as the Antikythera mechanism has survived from this period. In medieval Europe, mechanical clocks began to appear in the 13th and 14th centuries. These early clocks used gear trains to divide time into hours, and sometimes to show astronomical information. The technology of precision gears that had existed in ancient Greece was, in a sense, reinvented in medieval Europe. By the Renaissance, European craftsmen were building elaborate astronomical clocks and orreries, mechanical models of the solar system. These devices showed the motions of the planets using gear trains and could predict celestial events. In function, they were similar to the Antikythera mechanism, though their designs were different. The most famous of these is probably the Prague astronomical clock, installed in 1410 and still operating today. This clock shows the positions of the sun and moon in the zodiac, phases of the moon, and the time in several different systems. It's a masterpiece of medieval engineering. In the 17th and 18th centuries, clockmakers created increasingly sophisticated astronomical mechanisms. They could show not just the positions of celestial bodies, but also their complex motions, including phenomena like the equation of time, the difference between mean solar time and actual solar time caused by Earth's elliptical orbit. All of these devices follow in the tradition of the Antikythera mechanism, using gears to model astronomical cycles. But none of their makers knew about the ancient Greek device. It lay forgotten at the bottom of the sea, while they independently developed similar technologies. This makes us think about the nature of invention and discovery. The Antikythera mechanism shows that the same technological challenges can be solved in different eras by different people. The human drive to understand and model the cosmos is constant, and sufficiently advanced cultures will develop similar tools to explore these questions. The ongoing study of the Antikythera mechanism involves collaboration between many different fields of expertise. Classical scholars study the inscriptions, working to read and translate every legible letter. This is painstaking work, requiring expertise in ancient Greek dialects and specialized astronomical terminology. Each new inscription that's deciphered adds to our understanding of how the mechanism was used and what it displayed. Historians of science analyze what the mechanism tells us about ancient astronomical knowledge. They compare the parameters used in the mechanism with what we know from ancient texts and modern calculations of ancient celestial positions. This helps us understand how accurate ancient astronomy was and what methods ancient astronomers used. Mechanical engineers study the gear trains and try to understand the design choices. Why did the ancient maker choose these particular gear ratios? How did they solve specific mechanical problems? What can modern engineers learn from ancient solutions? Computer scientists create virtual models of the mechanism, simulating how it would have worked. These models help us understand the missing parts and test different hypotheses about the complete structure. Materials scientists analyze the bronze alloy used in the gears, the corrosion products, and the limestone concretions. This tells us about ancient metalworking techniques and helps conservators understand how to best preserve the fragments. Archaeologists study the shipwreck context, trying to understand where the ship was traveling, what else was on board, and what this tells us about ancient trade and the movement of luxury goods. All of these different perspectives contribute to a fuller understanding of this remarkable artifact. It's a truly interdisciplinary effort, bringing together expertise from across the sciences and humanities. And the work continues. Not all of the fragments have been fully analyzed. New imaging techniques may reveal more details in the corroded bronze. Ongoing study of the inscriptions continues to uncover new information. Each year brings new insights into this ancient computer. Let's think for a moment about what it means that the Antikythera Mechanism survived at all. Bronze is a valuable material. Throughout history, bronze objects have been melted down and reused. Statues become weapons. Weapons become tools. Tools become new statues. The cycle continues, with very few bronze objects surviving from ancient times in their original form. If the ship carrying the Antikythera Mechanism had successfully reached Rome, what would have happened to it? Perhaps it would have been displayed in the home of a wealthy Roman, admired for a generation or two. But eventually, its owner would die, and his heirs might not understand or appreciate it. Or Rome might face one of its periodic crises, and valuable bronze would be confiscated for coinage or military equipment. The mechanism might have been broken down, its gears separated, its careful construction undone. The bronze would be melted, and all trace of this ancient computer would vanish. At best, we might have a brief mention in an ancient text, a passing reference to a sphere or globe that showed the motions of the heavens. But because the ship sank, because the mechanism was buried under the sea, it was protected from human recycling. The same water that corroded the bronze also preserved it through mineral deposits. The same depth that made it impossible for ancient divers to recover also kept it safe from later salvagers. And then, through an accident of history, Greek sponge divers happened to take shelter near that particular island and happened to dive in that particular spot. If they had anchored 100 meters away, they might never have found the wreck. If the storm had been more severe, they might not have had the opportunity to dive at all. The survival of the Antikythera Mechanism is the result of a remarkable chain of circumstances. It reminds us that so much of what we know about the past depends on the accidents of preservation. For every artifact that survives, countless others are lost forever. The Antikythera Mechanism raises profound questions about the nature of knowledge and progress. We often think of human knowledge as cumulative, steadily building over time. Each generation learns from the previous one and adds new discoveries. In this view, progress is inevitable and irreversible. We know more than our ancestors, and our descendants will know more than us. But the Antikythera Mechanism tells a different story. It shows that knowledge can be lost. The ancient Greeks achieved a level of mechanical sophistication that vanished for more than a millennium. Later, civilizations had to rediscover techniques and principles that ancient craftsmen had already mastered. This is not unique to mechanical technology. We know that the ancient Romans made a type of concrete that was more durable than most modern concrete, especially for structures exposed to seawater. The exact formula was lost in the Middle Ages, and only recently has been partially reconstructed. The Greeks and Romans knew how to make flexible glass that wouldn't shatter when dropped. The technique was lost, and we still don't know exactly how they did it. Ancient metalworkers created Damascus steel and Greek fire, materials and substances whose exact composition remains unknown to us. In mathematics, the ancient Greeks made discoveries that were forgotten and only slowly rediscovered in later centuries. The method of exhaustion, an early form of integral calculus, was known to Archimedes in the 3rd century BCE, but wasn't fully developed in Europe until the 17th century CE. What the Antikythera mechanism makes clear is that technological and scientific progress is not guaranteed. It requires not just individual genius, but sustained social and economic structures that support learning, craft specialization, and the transmission of knowledge across generations. When these structures break down, whether through war, economic collapse, or cultural change, knowledge can be lost. And once lost, it may take centuries to rediscover. This is a sobering lesson for our own age. We tend to assume that our knowledge is secure, preserved in books and digital databases, accessible to anyone who wants to learn. But knowledge requires active preservation and transmission. It requires people who understand it and can teach it to others. It requires societies that value learning and provide resources for education and research. The Antikythera mechanism reminds us that even sophisticated civilizations can lose their accumulated knowledge. It encourages us to preserve and transmit what we know, to value the skills and learning of craftsmen and scholars, and to recognize that progress is never automatic or inevitable. As we near the end of our journey through the story of the Antikythera mechanism, let's reflect on what makes this artifact so captivating. Part of it is certainly the mystery, the initial discovery of corroded gears that shouldn't exist, the decades of confusion about what the mechanism was, the gradual revelation of its complexity and purpose. All of this creates a compelling narrative of discovery and understanding. Part of it is the craftsmanship, the precision of the gears, the sophistication of the design, the attention to detail in the inscriptions. Looking at the mechanism, even in its corroded state, we can appreciate the skill and care of its ancient maker. Part of it is what it tells us about ancient science. The mechanism demonstrates that the ancient Greeks didn't just theorize about the heavens. They built working models, turning abstract mathematics into tangible machines. They were scientists in the fullest sense, combining observation, theory, and practical application. Part of it is the connection it creates across time. When we turn a reconstruction of the mechanism and watch the pointers move through the zodiac, we're sharing an experience with someone who lived more than 2,000 years ago. We're using the same device in the same way to explore the same questions about the cosmos. And part of it is what it makes us wonder. If the ancient Greeks could build this, what else could they build? What other marvels existed that we don't know about? What would the ancient world have achieved if its knowledge traditions had continued unbroken into later centuries? The Antikythera mechanism is a window into a lost world of ancient technology and science. It's a reminder that our ancestors were not primitive or simple. They were humans like us, curious about the universe, ingenious in solving problems, capable of remarkable achievements. It's a humbling artifact. It reminds us that we're part of a long human story of discovery and innovation. And it encourages us to wonder what future generations will think of our own achievements. What will survive of our civilization? What will puzzle and amaze archaeologists thousands of years from now? In the darkened halls of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, the fragments of the Antikythera mechanism rest in climate-controlled cases. The bronze is still corroded, still fragile, still bearing the marks of its 2 millennia beneath the sea. But now we understand what it is. We can read its inscriptions and reconstruct its missing parts. We know how to turn its crank and follow its pointers through the cycles of the heavens. we've connected with the ancient maker across the vast span of time, understanding their knowledge and appreciating their skill. The mechanism is no longer a mystery, though questions remain. It's become a testament to human ingenuity, ancient and modern. Ancient in the brilliance of its original creation. Modern in the patience and expertise required to understand it. It stands as proof that technology and science are not the exclusive achievements of our age. They are timeless human endeavors, as old as civilization itself. Every era has its makers and its questioners, its craftsmen and its scholars, all working to understand the world and our place in it. The Antikythera Mechanism is their legacy and ours. It's a bridge across time, connecting us to the ancient world and reminding us that the human drive to understand the cosmos is eternal. And so, our journey through the story of the Antikythera Mechanism comes to an end. From its creation in ancient Greece, through its long sleep beneath the Mediterranean waves, to its rediscovery and gradual understanding in our own time, it has traveled through more than 2,000 years of history. It remains one of the most remarkable artifacts ever discovered, a testament to ancient knowledge and skill, a reminder of what can be lost and what can be found, and a continuing source of wonder for anyone who encounters it. Thank you for spending these 2 hours with Tales of History. Whether you're still awake or already drifting into dreams, I hope this journey through time has brought you peace and wonder. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries and forgotten marvels. There are countless stories waiting to be told, countless mysteries waiting to be explored. Until next time, sleep well, dream of ancient wonders, and remember that the past is never truly lost. It waits beneath the waves, buried in the earth, hidden in forgotten texts, ready to reveal its secrets to those patient enough to listen. Good night.